بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The ayah for today is Malik Yawmiddin. That's ayah number, I'm not sure. Malik Yawmiddin. An interesting fact about Malik, generally when Malik is written in the Arabic language, it's written like this, Mim, Alif, Lam, Kaf. But in the reason why it's written like that is, as I explained before, that it's the Mus'haf Ottomani was written like that, and because of continuity and for reasons of authenticity, the spelling of Malik is retained. The meaning of Malik is the one who owns something, the one who is completely and utterly and thoroughly in charge of something. So the individual who is the Malik of something, he can do with that thing as he pleases, how he pleases, when he pleases. There's no restrictions on the manner in which he executes or how he deals with it. It's effectively his property. Yawm is a period of time, generally translated as a day, but it could be any period of time up to 50,000 years. A deen is generally could be translated as lifestyle. In this ayah, a deen is translated as the day of judgment. So Allah says that Allah is the owner of the day of judgment. So one of the questions that come up is, why does Allah say that Allah is the owner of the day of judgment? Is Allah then not the owner of all things? Is Allah not in charge of all things? Does Allah not then have control over all things? So why does Allah say in Surah Al-Fatiha that Allah is the Malik, the owner of the day of Deen? There's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is on this day and only on this day that all of Allah's creation will stand before Allah, right? So today we find that people are in different places. Some of them are dead, some of them are alive, some of them are yet to come. But on this day, on the day of Qiyamah, the entire creation of Allah, Allah's creation from man, jinn and animals, they will all be standing before Allah. Another reason why Allah refers to the day of Qiyamah, Allah refers to Himself as the owner of the day of judgment, the owner of the day of Deen, is because at other times Allah allows individuals to have the illusion of ownership. So Allah might make an individual think that he has ownership of his life. Allah might allow an individual to think that he has ownership of his time. Allah might allow an individual to think that he has ownership of his health. The reality is that no one really has ownership of the time, of the wealth, of the health. It is only Allah who has ownership. But Allah allows, in this dunya, Allah allows the illusion of ownership. And one of the reasons for Allah allowing the illusion of ownership is the very concept of Iman. Allah speaks about Iman as الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Allah speaks about part of Alif Lam Mim ذَلِكَ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah speaks about those who have taqwa. Allah says they are those who have Iman, they believe in that which is the unseen. That is part of Iman. So let me give you an example. Do you have Iman that I've got a coke in my hand? Do you have Iman that I've got a coke in my hand? Do you have Iman that I've got a coke in my hand? No, you don't have Iman that I've got a coke in my hand. You can see that I've got a coke in my hand. There's empirical evidence that leads you to the conclusion that I've got a coke in my hand. If I were to ask you, do I have 50 rand in my pocket? Do you have Iman that I have 50 rand in my pocket? Now you can say, yes, I have Iman, or I don't have Iman. Because there's no proof from your side. There's no empirical evidence from your side that I have a 50 rand in my pocket. There might be certain indications. Do you trust me? Don't you trust me? I'm a rich person, I'm a poor person. Do I carry cash around? Do I usually deal with plastic? So there are certain indications that might lead you to the conclusion, but there's no empirical evidence indicating that. That is the concept of Iman, that we believe in angels, we believe in the day of Qiyamah, we believe in Qadha and Qadr of Allah. Those are things which there's no empirical evidence to prove with a great degree there's no certain evidence to prove that. We believe it with certainty, but we believe it despite the fact that we cannot see it. Can anyone prove to me that angels exist? No, you can't prove to me that angels exist. You can't see them, you can't hear them, you can't touch them, you can't feel them, you can't smell them, but yet we believe that angels exist. That is the essence of Iman, that you believe that which you cannot see. You believe that which is beyond the senses. Um, Another reason why Allah refers to Himself as the Malik of Yawmiddin is that anyone who rules and needs support to rule. In many ways, when you find a ruler is in charge, you find that really those below him, those who is in charge of the ruler is actually more in need of them than he is in need, than they are. The ruler is more in need of them than they are in need of the ruler, right? I give you a typical example. In South Africa, we have a democracy, right? The people rebel against the leader. The people decide that they don't want a particular leader in charge, right? That leader has no legitimacy. So the reality is that every single ruler, they need support of others to stay in charge. But Allah needs no support to stay in charge. In fact, Allah supports others so that they can have the illusion of being in charge. Also, when we look at Surah Al-Fatiha this far, it deals with three main themes of Islam: Tawheed, Risala, and Akhirah. Tawheed, in that we believe in Allah and Allah alone. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allah says that Allah is a Rabb of existence. I explain what Al-Alameen is: everything in existence besides Allah. So if Allah is, and I explain also what Rabb means, that it is Allah who sustains that in the entire existence cannot exist without Allah. So that deals with Tawheed. And then the next ayah deals with Risala, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And this is very indirect in how Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim deals with the concept of Risala. One of the well-known exegetes, the Ash'ari scholar Fakhruddin al-Razi rahimahullah, he died in the year 606 Hijri. He's got in his tafsir that Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim indicates the concept of Risala within Islam. And one of the reasonings that he gives for that is that Allah is in command, Allah is in control, and Allah judges us. But it would not be fair for a king, it would not be fair for a ruler, it would not be merciful of Allah if Allah did not send a messenger to warn us and to give us glad tidings. Also, when Allah speaks about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, He says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, except as a rahmah for existence. And then we have the concept of Akhirah, which is Malik Yawmiddin. Malik Yawmiddin speaks about the day of Qiyamah. Also, you find another interesting concept that sort of the eloquence and the symmetry of the Qur'an, that Allah first introduces Himself, and then He starts to juxtapose His love for an individual, His mercy towards an individual with His anger. He starts Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. That is Allah announcing Himself. He is Allah, the Rabb of existence. And then He shows you His merciful side. And oftentimes, when we speak about Islam, we forget this merciful side. But when Allah starts, Allah first announces Himself. And then the first thing that He does, He speaks about His merciful side. Allah speaks about Himself as Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And then Allah brings about the sort of almost angry approach, or Allah being in control. Allah says Allah is Malik Yawmiddin. Allah is the owner. Allah is one in charge of the day of Deen. There's a well-known scholar, Sayyid Qutb, rahimahullah. Sayyid Qutb, if I remember correctly, he died in the year 1966. He was actually executed because he stood up against the Egyptian regime of the time. He was of the opinion that Islam, that a country should be ruled by nothing but Islam. And in today's time, many non-Muslim academics have looked at him and seen him as one of the individuals who initiated the concept of so-called jihad, global jihad, and like the whole terrorism issue. Whatever views are on that issue, the reality is that Sayyid Qutb was a brilliant linguist. His field of expertise was linguistics, and he brings up a very strong. He's got his tafsir fi Dhilal al-Qur'an, which he wrote, and then he was thrown in prison because of his views. And while in prison, he basically rewrote the tafsir. So this is a tafsir. Also another thing. This no matter what we might. No matter whether we agree or disagree with Sayyid Qutb's views, that was a very spiritually enriching time for Sayyid Qutb. And there's a saying that goes that wisdom is the lost property of the believer. It grabs hold of it wherever it takes it. So even if we disagree with someone, even from the level of aqidah, even if a guy is a kafir, even a guy is a Jew or Christian, and there's some wisdom in what they have, we as Muslims should not be afraid to make use of it. So Sayyid Qutb, as I said, is not an established scholar within Islam. I have to say that. But there's quite a few insights in the exegesis of Sayyid Qutb. One of which he speaks about the wisdom of Qiyamah. One of the wisdoms of Qiyamah is, he says that it reigns in the desire of the Muslim, of an individual. Because an individual has different desires to do many things. But when you have this concept in your mind, when you're cognizant of the fact that on the day of Qiyamah you will be dealt with, you will be dealt with justly. And there's the ayah of the Qur'an where Allah says, وَأَلَّيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. It's not for humanity except that which he has earned. So the result of your actions will be seen on the day of Qiyamah. And that is one thing that reigns in the desires of the Muslim. Another issue is altruism, right? Altruistic feelings towards others is basically where you say, look, I will do something for you for the good of doing it. Right? I don't expect any reward from you, and that is what many of the prophets came. That when they came, that's when the prophets when they came, they said, look, my reward is with Allah. That's it. I don't seek any reward from you. And when we look at the way the world runs, we realize the wisdom of this. That people no longer do good for the sake of doing good. People oftentimes now we do good because there's some sort of ulterior motive in it, whatever it might be. But when you have this concept in your mind that what I do, my options in life, what I choose to do is ultimately, I'm ultimately going to see the effects of that on the day of Qiyamah. It changes the entire psyche, the entire consciousness of a Muslim. Which is why there's a hadith, there's a narration of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, where he says that hold yourself accountable before you yourself are held accountable. Also, one of my teachers, he had an interesting explanation for Malik Yawmiddin, and it's not found also within the, I haven't found it within any of the classical tafasir. It might be there, Allah Alam, but it is in line with Islamic thought. This is that Malik Yawmiddin indicates that Allah is in charge of the very concept of time, because Yawm is, as I said, a measure of time, generally indicating towards a day. So when Allah is in charge of the very concept of time, so that one of the implications of that is that we as human beings, when we can only perceive that, we can only conceive that which we have perceived. So we as human beings, we only have the ability to think within the dimensions of space and also within the dimensions of time. Think about something, and you think about something which doesn't have a beginning. Is it possible to think of something which doesn't have a beginning? I mean, everything, when you think about it, it has to have a beginning. But we understand that Allah is beyond time. So that leads to an interesting way of looking at life, because when we look at the cosmos, when we look at the universe, we realize that everything has got to have a beginning, right? And that is understood that everything goes back to a certain singularity. And what happens before that? And we as Muslims, we obviously believe that Allah is the creator of the universe. So one of the questions that come up then, who created Allah? What was there before Allah? What was there before Allah? And when we look at Malik Yawmiddin, when we understand Allah as being the owner of time, when we understand Allah as being separate and beyond time, when we understand Allah as not being confined to time, it allows an individual not to conceive Allah, but it allows an individual to understand that if you are not constrained by time, the concept of something having a beginning that doesn't play a role. The only reason why we see things as having to have a beginning is because we can only perceive things within a dimension of time. In fact, we perceive things in a very strict manner of time. We see things as having cause and effect. We don't see things as having We don't see things as occurring in a very spontaneous way. I mean, can you conceive of something not having a cause and effect? Things just happen. Like we have an inability not only to think beyond time, but also we have an inability to see things beyond a very specified way in which time can play out. So that's one of the implications of Allah being the owner of the very concept of time. Another implication of Allah being the owner of the very concept of time is that we have an inability to conceive of Allah. So when we speak about Allah's greatness, when we speak about Allah's power, we have an inability to conceive it in its actuality. So when we speak about Allah, we just say that Allah has promised us X, Y, and Z, and we just believe that Allah will, inshaAllah, provide that for us. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين. Are there any questions? Questions? I think I'm not going to ask next lecture because every time I ask is questions, no one asks. Questions? Ask. Is there any questions from behind the curtain?
No questions.
No questions. وصلى الله على محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين.